Deuteronomy chapter 32, the Song of Moses. This is a song that Moses co-wrote. There's no other way to say it. Moses co-wrote this song with Yahweh, with the one true God of the universe. What was the song designed for? Quickly, as we get back into these thoughts, this is the idea that's going on in this song. Remember what the big picture, just step back a moment. We've got the second generation of Israel, the sons of the fathers who came out of Egypt, who went through the 10 plagues, who crossed the Red Sea, who saw all these wonderful signs and miracles and the powerful hand of God at work, who got to Kadesh Barnea and wanted to, or to Meribah and wanted to go across into the promised land 40 years earlier. This generation's parents were told by God, go and take the land, send in spies and check it out, and then go in and take the land. Well, they were afraid. The 12 spies went in, and 10 of the spies said, we can't do it, and 2 of the spies says, yes, we can. Those 2 spies were Joshua and Caleb, had no fear because the Lord was on their side. The battle was the Lord's, and they knew it. Their children, that generation, was punished by Yahweh that they would all die in the wilderness, and because of their cowardice, because they wouldn't trust God to be able to give them the land, those people were all sentenced to die. The audience that Moses is talking to are their sons. It's their children. It's the sons and the daughters and the children's children of that first generation. We call this the second generation. So Moses is again teaching them the law that God gave him to teach the first generation at Mount Sinai. He has to teach the kids again. And so that's what he's doing. And part of the things he's bringing out as he's readying this group of people to go with Joshua, to follow Joshua into the land of Canaan, he has to tell them, don't forget the covenant. Don't forget the contract that's in agreement between Yahweh and Israel. Don't forget what it is that God expects for you, demands from you, and don't forget that God is your God, that Yahweh is your God. So he's teaching them all these things through the book of Deuteronomy. These things also, that Yahweh chose Israel. Why the song? Why does Moses end Deuteronomy with the song? Why does God choose a song? That's what we're going to talk about here for just a second. Yahweh chose Israel and designed a contract that Israel was to live by. That's the Mosaic Law. I will be your God and you will be my people. Well, how will we be your people? By doing exactly and precisely what I tell you to do in the law of Moses. It's got a ceremonial section. It's got a moral section. It's got a worship section. It tells them exactly what to do before God, how to live, how to worship, what to eat, what to wear. It tells them everything. And if they will only do it, then God will be pleased with them and just shower upon them blessing after blessing. So they are in contract with God. They are under contract. They've both signed, Israel and God. The Mosaic Law then is the contract drawn up between the two parties, Yahweh and Israel. Make no mistake, it's an agreement. It's a contract. That's what covenant means. Berit, B-E-R-I-T. That's what the Hebrew word means. It's a contract. It's an agreement between parties. The Mosaic Law is the contract that both sides agreed to obey. Now I'm answering the question, why does Moses write a song? Why did God tell Moses to write a song? And it's to remind Israel, the song would remind Israel of her obligations under the contract. Remember, this song wasn't something that they would hear one time after Moses writes it and then forget. The song is something that they would remember forever. Why did God choose a song? Why not something different? And I've said this before, songs are easy to remember and they're hard to forget. This song would be on the lips of the people, at least in their streams of consciousness, as others have said. The song will be in their minds, even when they're being blessed by God. It's a song they won't forget. It's an anthem that they'll play over and over and over in their minds, in the good times and in the bad times. And that's why God designed the song. I want you to remember and to always understand that if you fall away from me, if you choose not to obey the law, there will be consequences. There will be discipline. There will be severe punishment for Israel. And God wants them to know that as a deterrent, right? So that they won't fall away from Him. I just want you to keep that in mind about the song. We read about it in Deuteronomy chapter 32, and then we turn the page and the song is gone. It's just gone from our minds. We're not Jews. It wasn't given to us to remember. But to Israel, they were to remember this song, and God said that He would implant it in their minds. It wouldn't be an easy song to forget. Why? Because the song would remind them of their contract, their agreement. Whatever Yahweh says, we will do. That's what Israel said. And the song's going to remind them of that. And when you don't do it, and you're being punished by God, and enemy nations come against you and they conquer you, remember through the song how things should be in Israel. In the future, when Israel would break the agreement they made with God, and God tells them that they will, God tells Moses that they will break the agreement, that they will become idolaters, that they will turn aside from worshiping Yahweh and worship things that are not gods, whether they're called gods or not. And when Israel, not if, but when Israel would break the agreement in the future that they had made with God and go and worship false gods, this song would remind them of Yahweh, their contract, their agreement to obey God. All that Yahweh says we will do. We will be His nation. He will be our God. The song is going to remind you of that promise you made and of how things should be in Israel when things are crazy and chaotic and God's punishment is on Israel. This song would play over and over in their head until they would realize we have disobeyed God. This isn't God. Yahweh hasn't changed His mind about who we are. Yahweh hasn't let us down. You see, here's the point. Yahweh hasn't let us down. We have let Him down. And thus the song of Moses. What we learn about Israel in the Old Testament, if nothing else, is that Israel was prone to idolatry. They were prone to it. It was an innate thing in the Jew to want to worship something other than God. This is the statement you don't read in the Old Testament, but you read it in the New Testament. So are you. And so am I, prone to idolatry. If not, John wouldn't have commanded little children, keep yourselves from idols. But he does command the Christian to keep ourselves from idols. It's not a natural thing. Now listen to what I'm going to say. It's not natural to the heart of man, whether the Jews in Moses' day or us in this day. It's not natural to man. It's not in our human nature to bow in humility and worship God. It's not what our heart wants to do. Jeremiah 17:9 very clearly says, the heart of man is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. It's not a heart that wants to worship God. If it were a fact, now listen to this, if it were a fact that the human heart wants, is inclined to worship God, then most people would worship God and only a few would choose not to. The opposite is the truth. Look around in our church right now. Look at the blue seats. The fact of the matter is, it's innate to the heart of man to be deceived and to think we can have things apart from God, happiness apart from God, contentment apart from God, rather than coming to bow the knee and worship to God and to learn what He wants us to learn in this book. If it was natural, the churches would be filled, but they're not. It's not natural to want to worship God. It's natural to want to worship something else. We want to do things our way, and so did Israel. I'm saying these things because I don't want you and I don't want me to point the finger at the Jews and somehow put the Jews into some category that they're not in. The Jews are just human. I wonder sometimes whether God chose Israel because he knew there's no more obstinate people on earth. There's going to be no more arrogant group of people on earth. There's not going to be another group of people that are so successful and who want to live life apart from me. Israel is like the poster child for idolatry throughout the ages and trying to live life apart from God. But we do the same thing every day. The human heart is deceitful. We want to worship whoever and whatever we want to worship. And there's no question about that. That's our natural inclination. It's the heart of man. I remember, and I've said to you before, there's a song that I love. I think Amy Grant wrote it. I know she sings it. She's the artist that I've heard sing it. And this is the line in the song that always chokes. I choke having to say it because it's so, so true. And the line in the song is this. She says, I'd rather fight you. She's speaking to God in the song. And she says, I'd rather fight you for something I don't even want than take what you're giving me. And I find that to be, I'm a musician, I like music, I love lyric, and I find that to be so, so true of the heart of man. It's true of my heart. I'd rather fight you, God, for something I don't even want. I'm just going to put up a fight because I want it my way. I'd rather fight you for something I don't even want than freely accept what you're giving me. The blessings that you want to give me, I'd rather fight you for something I think I need and want, even though truly I don't even want it. I'd rather fight you for something I don't even want than take what you're giving me. And I see through this song of Moses exactly that heart in Israel. They're fighters against God. Yisrael. The name Yisrael means a people that contend with God. When God changed Jacob's name from Yaakov to Yisrael, it was after Jacob fought with God all night. It's after Jacob fought with the angel of the Lord, the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ, all night. Through the night they were wrestling, the Scripture says. It was in the morning that his name was changed from Jacob to Israel. He contends with God. This people they're always contending. They're always striving against God, with God. They're always at odds. It's a very fascinating name. Others want to translate Israel differently. But that's what it means in context. It was the fight that Jacob had with God when God says, I'm going to call you Israel. It's not a great name. The contenders with God. The nature of idolatry, and we move forward. Why does man turn to idols? Why is Israel so prone to turn to idols? And why are we so prone to idolatry that even still we have this ongoing command from John, little children, guard yourselves from idols? A couple of thoughts. Man thinks, I bring this up again, I said this last week, but it got some play, it got some comments, it got people thinking about the nature of idolatry. Again, in America in 2022, when we think of the word idolatry, when we read the Old Testament and we read about the prophets of Baal and the idols to Baal and Asherah and the Asherah poles that they carved and the crazy stone altars that they had where they were sacrificing animals to false gods, we think, well, we don't do any of that. We simply think idolatry is an Old Testament thing. It's the thing of the past. And since I'm not bringing animals or worshiping any falsely named God, I'm not an idolater. That's not my problem. And I'm telling you, it's all of our problems, or else the New Testament, again, wouldn't command the Christian, little children, keep yourselves from idols. Guard yourselves against idolatry. In Acts chapter 15, remember what they told them? The council of the leaders, the first church, having up against them the legalists in the early church, saying you got to keep the Mosaic law. One of the things that they concluded for the early church was abstain from things sacrificed to idols. Keep yourselves from idolatry. Don't eat the things that have been sacrificed to idols. That wasn't the big issue. The issue was you've got to kill an animal before you can eat the animal. And they're killing the animal in the worship of a false god. Don't be idolaters. To the early church and to this church. Because idolatry is not just this Old Testament notion of worshiping some false god. You might be free of that. I guarantee you dabble in idolatry. I guarantee you I dabble in idolatry. Why does man turn to idols? Because man thinks he can achieve success, which man thinks leads to happiness and contentment. Success is what you want, because that, when you're successful, whether that means you get the promotion at work, you're the boss, corner office, big money, whatever success means to you, when you achieve what you think success is, that will lead to your happiness and contentment, all without the one true God. That's the nature of idolatry at its core. I want to do this my way and achieve what I consider success apart from God. That's exactly what Israel does for the next 1,000 years of history. In idolatry, man gets to decide who he worships. So make no mistake, man is created to be a worshipful creature. We worship. We want to worship. We just don't want to worship God. What do we worship today? We worship science. Aren't we supposed to follow the science? Clearly we worship science. Clearly in America we worship intellect, knowledge, intellectual superiority. We worship intellect. We worship self. I mean, look at YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. People are worshipers of selves. Otherwise, you don't take selfies of yourself, getting your nails done or something, like anybody in the world cares about that. But we are so self-absorbed. We're all in our own little bubbles. It's idolatry. Idolatry is the worship of something other than God. Just a simple definition. Idolatry is the worship of something other than God as if it were God. And you think, well, I don't do that. I don't worship my phone as if it were God. But let me just paint a slightly different picture for you. Everything we are and everything we have comes from God. That includes our success. It includes our happiness. It includes contentment. If you think you can get success or happiness and contentment in a way that either opposes the Scripture directly or bends it so it's unrecognizable, then that's idolatry. The worship of something other than God as if it were God. Everything we have comes from God, and when we lose sight, and this is what Israel will do very quickly, when we lose sight of God's hand in everything we are and everything we have, we start to slide into idolatry as we find replacements for God. And that's what Israel will do. Remember what it is that God says causes Israel, or what the trigger is when Israel becomes idolatrous and turns away from God and starts worshiping other things. Remember what it was? You're going to go into the land and you're going to get fat. You're going to live in houses that you didn't build. You're going to harvest grapes from vines you didn't grow. You're going to have fruit trees galore. Your herds are going to increase. Your cattle's going to increase. Your flocks are going to increase. You're going to be prosperous. And when you grow fat, Yeshurun, the one who should be the upright one for God, Israel, will cast God away and say, look what I've built. I'm a self-made person. I brought myself up from nothing, from poverty, from slavery in Egypt, and look what we've accomplished, Israel. Instead of saying, we don't deserve any of this. Look what Yahweh has done for us as a people. Look how high we are. Look how preeminent we are. We're the nations that all other nation, we are the nation that everybody looks to. And we didn't deserve it. God did all of this for us. But that's not the heart of man. The heart of man is to get successful and slowly start turning your back on God, because when things are going good, you don't need Him nearly as much as when things are going bad, right? Isn't that the way your heart works? When everything is wonderful in life and things just, every rose seems to have no thorns and a perfect smell. Instead of having a heart of gratitude that we do have and can have for certain, the inclination of man is to say, not only do I deserve it, but I did it on my own. That's idolatry. That's idolatry. So all of that simply to lift up the Jews a little bit. I love Israel, you know that. I don't want to put the Jews in a category that they're not in, like there's some people, there's some type of human that couldn't obey God. No, that's not at all who they were. They were just another group of people just like we are. They had choices to make just like we do, and they failed miserably just like we do sometimes. The bulk of Israel were idolaters, and they would show their true colors very, very soon. Remember, when Moses is getting the law, he's on Mount Sinai receiving the law from Yahweh for the first time. And what's his brother Aaron and the tribes of Israel doing on the ground? Worshiping a golden calf. And God says, go down at once. For these people, your people who you brought, God puts it on Moses, your people, Moses, who you brought out of Egypt, have already turned aside from what just a couple of days ago they said, everything that Yahweh says we will do. It wasn't a week and a half. A week and a half. And they're worshiping a golden calf. Just like that. They heard God's words on Mount Sinai. This first generation said, whatever God says we will do. I say a week and a half. I don't know how long it was, but it was less than 40 days because Moses was on the mountain for 40 days with God, getting the tablets of the law. It was less than 40 days when Israel totally turned, forgot that Yahweh was the one true God, forgot that they weren't supposed to make idols, totally disobeyed the first two commands of God, and made for themselves a golden calf. And not only made it, but worshipped it. God says they made sacrifices to the idol and they worshiped it. And that's the heart of man. Not only the Jewish man, but you and me included. Little children, church of God, Christians, guard yourselves from idolatry. Verse 44, let's get into the chapter. Deuteronomy 32, verse 44. Then Moses came and he spoke all the words of this song in the hearing of the people. The song is finished. He with Joshua the son of Nun, and when Moses had finished speaking all these words to Israel, he said to them, another charge concerning the song. Oh, what a cute ditty, Moses. What a great song. We'll sing it once and forget it. No. That's not what the song is for. Moses says, take to your heart all the words which I am warning you today. That's the song. Take to your heart all the words which I am warning you today, which you shall command your sons to observe carefully. Even, not only the song, but even all the words of the law. But the song is in view here. Take to your heart all these words. Moses is referring to the lyrics of the song. So what is the song supposed to do for Israel? Just a couple of statements here. As they're replaying and singing and humming this song in their minds, what should Israel's thoughts be? What is the song about? The song is to keep them from idolatry. And this is the theme of the song, if you will, in just a couple of statements. When we walk away from Yahweh, if we walk away from Yahweh, He judges us and punishes us severely. You see, this is what the song says. We don't want Yahweh's judgment and discipline. Who would want that? So instead, the song would encourage people to choose to obey. We choose to obey the law of Moses, the Mosaic law, and live prosperously in the promised land. The song was exactly that. This is what the song taught. This is what the song was intended to do, to be a deterrent from walking away from God. Because when you do, there will be severe discipline. So we walk away from Yahweh in the song. The song says we walk away from Yahweh. The song says that when we do that, He judges us and punishes us severely. And we don't want Yahweh's judgments or punishments. So the song should motivate us to choose to obey the law of Moses and live prosperously in the land. That's what the song should do. The song should be a constant reminder of the certainty of Yahweh's judgment. You hear that? The song would be a constant reminder in their minds that if we walk away, God will certainly judge Israel. We don't want that. So we won't walk away. That's what the song was supposed to do. A constant reminder of the certainty of Yahweh's judgment if Israel disobeyed and started down the road to idolatry. It should have been a deterrent. Verse 47 says, "For it is not an idle word for you." Moses continues talking about the song and the whole law of Moses, the contract that Israel agreed to. It's not an idle word for you. Indeed, it is your life. It's the key to abundant living in the land. It's the key to rest, to resting, to Israel's rest in the land. Keeping the Mosaic law, understanding the song for what it is, a deterrent from sin. It's not an idle word, indeed it is your life, and by this word you will prolong your days in the land. You want to live in the land? You want your sons to live in the land? Enjoy the land of flowing with milk and honey? Obey the law. Disobey the law and you'll eventually get removed from the land. God will kick them out of the land of promise. Who wants that? So he says, by this word, living by not only the truths of the song, but the truths of all of the Mosaic law that God gave Israel, by living according to it, you'll prolong your days in the land, which you are about to cross the Jordan to possess. So obeying the Mosaic law that Moses took the whole book of Deuteronomy, all these series of sermons in Deuteronomy, obeying that law was the only way Israel could live securely and prosperously in the promised land. There was a simple recipe for Israel. Go into the land. Again, I'm going to give you fortified cities that you didn't build. You'll live in homes that you didn't build. You'll eat from vines that you didn't grow. You'll pick from trees that you didn't plant. You'll have herds and cattle and flocks galore. The greatest land on earth will be yours, and all you have to do to stay in it and have your kneading bowls full. Remember, lack of famine, but all the food you can eat. For every one of your women's wombs to be open and free, giving birth to children. There would be no miscarriage. There would be no lack of pregnancy in Israel. Everything would give life. And all you have to do, Moses says, is obey the law. Obey the law. And prolong your days in the land and live a prosperous, successful life according to the way God wants you to do it. I mentioned this earlier, but the law, when we talk about the Mosaic law, I just want to make this statement. It was complete. The Mosaic law touched every area of Jewish life. There was 3 parts to the law. The civil part of the law, the ceremonial part of the law, and the moral part of the law. 3 parts of the law of Moses. You can't separate the law. It's either all or nothing. If you think you're going to live by the law, you need to keep all of the law. What I'm saying is, though, within the law of Moses, there are 3 distinct types of laws. And one of the types of laws is civil. How are we to resolve conflicts with each other? It's the civil laws that we have, our codes for how to be neighbors, how to build fences, boundary lines, how to engage and trade with each other according to fair balances and scales. Don't cheat each other. All these kinds of things. Don't bear false witness. Don't lie about your neighbor. Don't falsely bring someone to court. You have to have 2 or 3 witnesses in order to bring a charge against someone. All those laws taught Israel how to live civilly with each other, how to resolve conflicts. There's also the ceremonial law. What's a ceremonial law? How to worship God. How do we worship Yahweh? Where do we worship Yahweh? How often do we worship Yahweh? Do we bring animals for different offerings? What type of animals do we bring? A lamb, a ram, a bull, a turtle dove? Do we bring flour with this? Do we bring wine with this worshipful sacrifice to God? God told them all of that. Are there feasts and festivals that all of Israel should gather for? Yes, God taught them all of that. Exactly how He wanted to be worshiped through the law. The ceremonial portion of the law. How to worship God. And then there's the moral code. The last one is the moral code. How are we to live with each other? Be holy, for I am holy. That's an issue of morality. There's all kinds of moral codes. You can honor your father and your mother is a moral code. There's all kinds of morality built into the Mosaic Law. You just got to go find it. Read the book of Exodus, read the book of Leviticus, and you'll see over and over, every law that you read will fall into one of these 3 categories: civil, ceremonial, or moral. So Moses says, live by this law. It is your life. It's the key to prosperous, successful life in the land. It's the key to staying in the land, living by the law. It's very simple for Israel. They had rules that were outlined for them. They had scrolls. They could go and say, okay, I want to trade an ox with my neighbor. How do I do that? And they could go through the law and say, okay, right here in Leviticus chapter so-and-so verse 12, that's how we would say it. They would just go to the scroll and they would see it right there. If one of their oxen gored another ox and that other ox died, what do we do? How do we make amends for that? They would exactly go to the law and say, right here it says that you're to pay me 15 or whatever % more for the ox. You're to do it this way. The law told them everything. They could go to it and find out exactly what God wanted them to do to be pleased. But as you know, and as we'll see, they would immediately turn from the law. But that's what Moses is telling them. The law is your life. In verse 48, let's move on. The Lord said to Moses, as Moses' death is foretold here. God has told Moses many years before, you're not going to enter into the promised land. You'll never step foot in it, Moses. And now he repeats these things to Moses. The Lord spoke to Moses that very same day, the same day that Moses gives the song to Israel. And he said, this is God speaking to Moses. Imagine the personal nature of our God. Go up to this mountain of the Abarim, Mount Nebo, which is in the land of Moab, opposite Jericho, and look at the land of Canaan, which I'm giving to the sons of Israel for a possession. And in verse 50, he says, then die on the mountain where you ascend, and be gathered to your people, as Aaron your brother died on Mount Hor and was gathered to his people. So Yahweh tells Moses, I've chosen the place where you can see all the land, and I've also chosen the spot where you will die on this earth. And it's called Mount Nebo in the land of Moab. Climb the mountain, I'm going to give you a glimpse of the land, and then I'm going to take your life. Because I told you you're not going into the land. Quickly, because I love maps. The Dead Sea in the far south, where it says Qumran right here. This is the Dead Sea. The Jordan River Valley right here. This little blue line is the Jordan River. Up here, the Sea of Galilee. This is where Moses is. The plains of Moab, you can see it very clearly right there. The plains, all these mountaintops. And then you have this big plain where the people of Israel, this second generation, are learning Deuteronomy from Moses. All of this is taking place right here. They're going to cross the Jordan River and go attack Jericho, but Moses is going to climb a mountain that's in this region here and look at the land of Canaan, the promised land. This is what it looks like, an actual photo. Amy and I were on Mount Nebo. It's a pretty well-established place. It's an ancient name, so they know where it is. And we were on Mount Nebo, and this is what the land looking across looks like. This is what Moses would have looked like, other than one little fact. What's the fact? Why would the land have looked different in Moses' day? I mean the topography, not the hills. Maybe what I mean is the vegetation. Why would it have looked different when Moses saw it? Why does it look like this today? Because of discipline. And God told Israel, I'm going to leave your land desolate. I'm going to kick you out of the land for idolatry and disobedience to the Mosaic law, and I'm going to leave your land desolate, where jackals will come in and howl, etc. I would imagine the land flowing with milk and honey that Moses looked at before the curse of the land and the desolation, I would imagine it looked entirely different than that. This was a lush land that Israel would have wanted to go into, yearned to go into. Why do you think Moses pleaded with God, let me go into the land, lift your discipline? And God said, no, and that's enough of that. I won't hear of it again. It was a lush land. This is what it looks like now. It's 25 miles from this point on Mount Nebo to Jerusalem. It's a very small country. 25 miles from here to Jerusalem. Now, we don't know how it is that God let Moses see the whole land, but it's clear that Moses did, or God did somehow, at least supernaturally, allow Moses to glimpse the whole land. I don't know that the eye can see 75 or 80 miles, but God says that Moses saw the land. This is a little plaque that's there that just tells you directions of things. And when you're standing at that point, if you follow those lines, it tells you, okay, Qumran is that way, Bethlehem is that way, Jerusalem is this way. Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives is out here somewhere, 25 miles away. It says right here it's 40 kilometers, that's 25 miles. So this is what Moses looked like. It's a rugged land. It's a rugged land. It's hilly. I wouldn't say it's altogether mountainous going into Jericho, but behind him on Pisgah and Mount Nebo, it's very mountainous in what we today call Jordan. It's a desolate land now. It simply just would not have looked like that when Moses saw it. It was the land flowing with milk and honey then. You can see in this picture also, this blue water here, that's the Dead Sea. And this little dark shadow line is the Jordan River Valley, because it's watered still and it's got some trees around it. This little area right here, you can almost not see it. It's so shaded. This is a little video. That portion right there, I'm about to come back to it, is Jericho. Remember, the people of Jericho could see the 1 million or 2 Jews there on the plains of Moab, knowing that they were about to cross over. This is all the plains that the Jews would have been on, this flatlands down below. But it's interesting, sorry for the shakiness, bad camera. But there's Jericho right there in that picture. So Israel could see Jericho, and the people of Jericho could see Israel. And don't you know, they were terrified, knowing that those people were about to cross that river soon and come right at them. We'll read about that in the life of Joshua here very soon. So interesting also in verse 50, let me say this, that God gives 2 commands to Moses here. And you think, commands, that's interesting. God commands Moses to die, and God commands Moses to be gathered to his people. Both of those are in the imperative mood in the Hebrew. Die and be gathered, God commands Moses. Now, obviously, Moses can't cause his own death. God isn't telling Moses to commit suicide on the mountain, and Moses can't be reunited to his people, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and others, others. He can't do that for himself. So the command mood, the imperative mood, is used differently here. It's used emphatically. The idea is to make clear to Moses the certainty of the fact that when you climb that mountain, you will die there and you will be gathered to your people from on top of Mount Nebo. You won't come down. It was an emphasis that God was using when He put it in the imperative mood. You won't come down for the mountain. It's been decreed. It's been decided. This will be your resting place. Can't change that fact. So He says, die on the mountain where you ascend and be gathered to your people as Aaron, your brother, died on Mount Hor and was gathered to his people. So Moses and Aaron both died before entering the promised land. And in verse 51, God reminds him of why. Because you broke faith with me, Moses, as did your brother Aaron. You broke faith with me in the midst of the sons of Israel at the waters of Meribah Kadesh, in the wilderness of Sin, because you did not treat me as holy in the midst of the sons of Israel. Remember, this is a time when God told Moses, go and speak to the rock and it will give its water. But Moses instead, with his high hand, his staff in his hand, struck the rock and he yelled at the people, you stubborn, obstinate people. Instead of treating God as holy on that day before the sons of Israel, Moses lost his cool and he struck the rock instead of speaking to the rock. And God said, because of that sin, you won't enter into the land. For you shall see the land, verse 52, you shall see the land at a distance, all the pictures that I showed you, but you shall not go there into the land which I am going to send the sons of Israel. After all Moses had done, he wouldn't enter into the land. We're going to move into verse 33 quickly, or chapter 33, Moses' blessing on Israel. In the beginning of it, verse 33, verse 1, now this is the blessing with which Moses, the man of God, blessed the sons of Israel before his death. Moses, knowing he's going to die, having been reminded by God, now he has the place, Mount Nebo, that's the place it's been decreed where I will die and be gathered to my fathers, be reunited to my family members who've passed before me in death. Now Moses gives a blessing for the sons of Israel. I don't want to go through all of these blessings. I just want to point out the names so you can see the sons of Israel. It's interesting that one of the sons is missing from the list. Remember how many sons Jacob had? How many? 12. And they would become the 12 tribes of Israel, but one of them is missing from this list. In verse 6, may Reuben live and not die. Reuben. Verse 7, regarding Judah. There's Judah, the fourth born. Of Levi, in verse 8, there's the third born. So we have the first, the third, and the fourth. Where's number 2? In verse 13 of Benjamin, or verse 12, in verse 12 of Benjamin, he said. Remember Benjamin, the younger brother of Joseph, the son of Rachel. In verse 13, he mentions Joseph. But Joseph would receive a double blessing. And so in verse 17, you have the two sons of Joseph listed. So don't count Joseph in your count. He's represented by his sons in verse 17, Ephraim and Manasseh, Ephraim and Manasseh. Those are Joseph's two sons. So it wasn't Joseph that has his name on a tribe, but receiving the double portion, Joseph's two sons would each have a tribe of Israel of their own. Ephraim and Manasseh. Verse 18, you see Zebulun and you see Issachar. And in verse 20, you see Gad. In verse 22, you see Dan. And in verse 23, you see Naphtali. Simeon is the one that's missing. Simeon, the son of Levi, the second born, or the first. Was Simeon first? Reuben was first. Simeon was second. The son of Levi is missing from the list. And we'll talk about exactly why the son of Levi is missing from the list in just a second. But look what he says about Naphtali in verse 23. I want to highlight Naphtali. Look at this map. Look where Naphtali is. I'm about to draw a red line around it. This is when Israel. This is the same map This Dead Sea, the River Jordan right there, going all the way up to the Sea of Galilee. And look at where Naphtali is right there, encompassing the Sea of Galilee. Look what he says about Naphtali and his blessings. He says, of Naphtali, O Naphtali, satisfied with favor and full of the blessing of the Lord, take possession of the sea and the south. Now, it's interesting to me when you think about Naphtali, what is the full blessing of the Lord that this part of Israel, that this geography, look, I tightened up on it there, what would happen eventually that would make Naphtali ultimately the greatest place of blessing in Israel? Who, let me ask, look at this place, the Sea of Galilee. Who is it that hung out at the Sea of Galilee more than anywhere else he hung out? Who is it that performed the bulk of his ministry around the Sea of Galilee in the area that belonged to the tribe of Naphtali? Jesus of Nazareth. The ultimate blessing of the Lord that would come to the people of Naphtali, even though Jesus was not a Naphtali tribesman, he was of Judah. The ultimate blessing would be the fact that Jesus Christ would spend the bulk of his life in the region of Naphtali. Also Zebulun, as you see the purple there, Zebulun is where Nazareth is. So Jesus grew up in the land of Zebulun, but moved into the Sea of Galilee, into Capernaum, set up his ministry headquarters at the northern point of the Sea of Galilee there in the land of Naphtali. So the satisfied with favor and the full blessing of the Lord would ultimately come when Jesus Christ would spend most of his life in his ministry in the territory of Naphtali. Verse 24, you see the name Asher. And if you count them all up, there's 12 of them, but there's one missing, and that's Simeon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And you say, well, wait a minute, there are 12 tribes of Israel. But don't forget, Levi would not gain a possession in the land. Levi would be the priests. So Levi wouldn't have their own territory in the land. So when you count the names again, there are only 11. What about the land? What about the territories of the land? Why isn't Simeon named in this blessing? Look what it says in Genesis 49, verse 7. Going back to the days when Jacob brought his 12 children together and blessed his 12 children in Genesis chapter 49, verse 7. He speaks of Simeon. He says, cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Simeon would not have, of all the tribes of Israel, look at the map again. Simeon will not have their own territory when Joshua goes in and gives all these land allotments to all these different tribes. You'll notice where Simeon is right here, inside the territory of Judah. Because God said in Genesis 49, I will scatter them within Judah. I'll scatter them in the land. They won't have their own territory. That was part of a curse on Simeon, that they wouldn't have their own territory. So Simeon, as we'll see in Joshua eventually, would only receive a few cities within Judah when Joshua divided the land. They didn't have their own territory. That's why Simeon is not named here. In verse 26, Moses closes the Pentateuch. The Pentateuch is the first 5 books of the Bible, all written by Moses. Don't forget the fact that we are about to close out all of Moses' writings in the book. We're at the end of Moses' ministry here. And he closes out the Pentateuch by looking at Yahweh again. Yahweh just promised through Moses and the blessings to all these tribes. We didn't read all the blessings. You can go in and read them. But Moses just promised that all these tribes would be blessed, and now he brings up Yahweh because only Yahweh has the power to see to it that all these tribes be blessed in the way that Moses just said they would be. In verse 26 he says, there is none like the God of Yeshurun. Yeshurun again means upright one. righteous, faithful, upright. It's a nickname for Israel. Even though Israel has never been the upright one day Israel will be the upright one in the future. They will be Yeshurun. They will live according to that name, but they don't now. There is none like the God of Yeshurun who rides the heavens to your help and through the skies in His majesties. These verses say very much about God. It says He rides the heavens to come to the aid of Israel. There is none like the God of Israel who rides the heavens to your help. When you need help, when you need aid, there's none swifter than Yahweh. There's none more powerful than Yahweh, the God of Israel. The God of Israel will be here in an instant, in an unnatural way. The God of Israel is omnipresent and omnipotent. It's interesting here. I'm going to have to pick a place to close. I got 5 minutes. It's interesting here. Look at the contrast. The Bible is a book of contrasts. And we see another great contrast in this verse. You don't see it entirely. You got to know a backstory. I'll tell you the backstory. But Yahweh here is called by Moses the one who rides the heavens. Right? The God of Yeshurun, the God of Israel, the one who rides the heavens. You know what the Canaanites called Baal, the false god that Israel would soon fall for? The rider of the clouds. Baal was known as the rider of the clouds. Moses says, no, Yahweh is the one who rides the clouds. Yahweh is the one who rides the heavens, not Baal. You're about to be introduced when you cross over the river into Canaan to a false god named Baal or Baal, and it is said of him that he rides the clouds. He does not. Yahweh rides the clouds. The Canaanites used this title for their false god Baal, known as the rider of the clouds. And again, Moses is bringing out the eternal fact that there is only one rider of the clouds, only one rider of the heavens, and that's Yahweh. And Israel is about to be given a choice, Yahweh or Baal. Remember, Joshua will say, choose this day whom you will serve. But for me and my house, we will serve Yahweh. You guys want to serve Baal? You know what's coming. Remember the song. Serious, severe discipline. Verse 27, he says, the eternal God is a dwelling place. Moses' last words to Israel, where's Moses' focus? Even as God has just reminded him that he's about to lose his life, Moses says, the eternal God is a dwelling place. Did Moses understand that death wasn't eternal, but that he would live eternally? He wouldn't die eternally, he would live eternally? Absolutely he did. If eternal God is a dwelling place, then Moses would be in the presence, in the dwelling place of the eternal God forever. His focus is so pure. The eternal God is a dwelling place, not Baal, not the gods, the false pantheon of gods you're about to be introduced to. Yahweh is the eternal God. Yahweh is the rider of the heavens. Yahweh is the one that will come to your aid. Yahweh is the one that has the power to defeat all your enemies. Yahweh is the one who underneath you, girding you up, are the everlasting arms of God. It's He who drove out the enemy before you and said, destroy. God does it. Yahweh does it. Yahweh is eternal. So Israel, as you go into the land, Moses' final words to them, there will never be a time when you need help when Yahweh won't provide it or won't be able to provide it. He's eternal. He's omnipresent. He rides the clouds to your help. There will never be a time when He won't help. In verse 28, so Israel dwells in security. The fountain of Jacob secluded in a land of grain and new wine, speaking of the time when they cross the river and live in the land. His heavens also drop dew down. In verse 29, he says, "Blessed are you, O Israel, who is like you?" Who is like you? What's the answer? No one. No other nation on earth has the responsibility and the privilege to be called the nation of God, the people of God. Blessed are you, O Israel, who is like you, a people saved by Yahweh, who is the shield of your help and the sword of your majesty. So your enemies will cringe before you, and you will tread upon their high places. Look at who Moses represents God yet again in his final volley to Israel. Look at who Moses represents God to be. Eternal, all-powerful, ever-present, the one who's chosen Israel above all other nations, the one who underneath lifts up Israel and preserves her, who will drive out the enemies, who saved Israel, who's the shield of their help, who's the sword of their majesty. It's as if Moses is saying, "Why, Israel, why won't you worship this God? If only you, Israel, if only you would obey the Mosaic law, you could be an incomparable people on this earth, in the same way that I have positioned Yahweh to be incomparable in your minds. Who is like you and who is like our God? You could be an incomparable, with no comparison, no equal on earth. That could be your testament, your testimony. But you won't do it. If only you would obey the Mosaic law, you could be the incomparable nation. But you won't, as we'll see as we continue. In Deuteronomy chapter 34, Moses dies, and we'll cover that next time. I've only got a half a page of notes, but we'll pick up there, and we'll introduce the book of Joshua. We're done with Deuteronomy after about 10 more minutes of talk. I told you 5 lessons in Deuteronomy. It took 20. Why? Again, because in the New Testament, when Jesus Christ walks the earth, He quotes the book of Deuteronomy more than any other book other than the Psalms. The book of Deuteronomy is where Jesus goes to bring Old Testament quotes into the New Testament world. That's why we spent 20 sessions in the book of Deuteronomy. It's Jesus' go-to book. Let's close in prayer.